Today on Earth Focus, new legislation may help protect sharks. We have an update. Will China be able to balance a growing economy with environmental protection? We have a report from Beijing. And China's green brothers, John Romankowitz and Sang Tsao, explain how they use music and video to make going green the new cool for China's youth. Earth Focus correspondent Miles Benson speaks with Allison Lincoln Day about their new film, Scarred Land, Wounded Lives. And young people in America are taking action on global warming in Congress and on campuses around the country. We'll see how. All coming up on Earth Focus. Sharks have roamed the seas for more than 400 million years. Yet today they are being hunted to extinction. Half of the species of oceanic sharks are threatened. 50 to 100 million sharks are killed each year, driven by the demand for products like shark fin soup.
Well, what's been happening in the last 10 or 15 years is we've seen very dramatic declines in shark populations all over the world. And this is really for three reasons. Firstly, the industrial fishing methods we use now, such as long lining, mean that a lot of sharks are caught when we're going after tuna and other species. Secondly, most shark fisheries are almost completely unregulated, so the fishing is not controlled. And the big thing that's happened in the last 10 or 15 years is the demand for shark products, and that's primarily shark fins, has gone through the roof. Shark fin soup used to be a quite exclusive dish that was only affordable to relatively wealthy people in places like Hong Kong and Singapore and Taiwan. And what's happened is, of course, there's been a massive economic boom in China, which means now, rather than being a few million people that can afford shark fin soup, we're talking about 100 million people that can afford shark fin soup. So what's happened is a massive expansion in demand. At the same time, the supplies have been dwindling all over the world. And what that means now is that literally everywhere on Earth, there is a price, not on the head, but on the fins of sharks.
The 11 great shark species in the Atlantic are all now so declined that scientists consider them functionally eliminated, which means they're not performing the role in the ecosystem that they're supposed to be performing. They're top predators, so they really do control everything in the ocean. They maintain the balance and the size of the fish populations beneath them. And then when you start to remove the sharks, it can even affect things like coral reefs. For example, if you take the sharks off of a coral reef, it will allow groupers and some of the other large predatory fish to increase in population. And then those groupers will eat things like parrotfish that are supposed to be grazing on algae on the reef. And without those fish to graze on algae, the algae takes over the reef and the reef starts to die.
There's a couple of things we'd like to get done as soon as possible. First of all, when we land sharks, we need to record which species we're landing, so we know which species are in trouble and which species are being caught. Secondly, we need to land the whole shark. Currently, it's possible for people to take the fins off before they land the shark, and that leaves the system open to abuse.
8 years ago, Congress enacted the Shark Finning Prohibition Act, but it was not tough enough, and lawmakers are trying again. The Shark Conservation Act of 2008 is designed to finally outlaw finning. It would not ban shark fishing, but would require U.S. commercial fishermen to leave the fins attached to the sharks that they catch.
We are looking for more data from shark fishing, making sure that we're having responsible shark management and that the fishermen can continue to fish, but just doing that in a sustainable way.
The bill also would require the Secretary of Commerce to identify and list fishing nations that have not adopted a regulatory program for shark conservation similar to the United States. Legislation was approved by the House of Representatives in July. A companion measure was introduced in the Senate and is now pending in the Senate Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee. If passed, the proposed new law would be a great victory for both sharks and their advocates.
China is a special place. And Beijing is the center of China. So when you convene this diverse group of people, filmmakers, philanthropists, educators, students, activists, NGO leaders in this year, an Olympic year, in a country which faces so many environmental challenges. We need to have these conversations. We need to share these ideas. And East needs to meet West.
Those conversations took place in Beijing on July 5th and 6, 2008, when 60 international leaders from a wide range of disciplines came together for the International Earth Forum. Their goal, to identify opportunities for the global community, to address China's environmental problems, and to find ways to make green business possible and profitable.
China as a major global player and obviously the largest and I think most influential country in Asia can really only aim to become the best. And the best meaning the most sustainable, the most forward-looking, progressive nation.
Which path will China take? Will the world's fastest growing economy continue to degrade the environment as it expands? Or will China embrace sustainable growth and promote energy efficiency, clean technology, less consumption, and less pollution?
Pollution is the pressure of human beings on the planet, and there are more human beings in one country, in China, than anywhere else on the planet.
Prosperity has taken a serious toll on China's environment. Beijing and areas in northeast China have the world's highest levels of nitrogen dioxide, a key smog gas. Some 750,000 Chinese die prematurely each year because of the quality of the air that they breathe, and airborne particles from Chinese coal plants, dust storms, and diesel trucks don't stay only in China. Some reach even as far as California. Water is also a problem. 3 million rural Chinese don't have access to clean drinking water. Some 60 billion tons of wastewater and sewage are dumped into China's lakes and rivers each year. In the Northeast, drought caused local dams and rivers to dry up, and 2 main reservoirs in one province only have enough water for 30 days. Farmers are concerned that soaring temperatures and little rain may adversely affect crops. But things may be changing. In China, people are not only more aware about the environment, but speak more openly about it.
Sustainable in China is a focus in recently, or even in the past couple of years already. And we hear it very often. It means recycling, develop forever, never stop, benefit forever, and never damage the natural.
China has always been a country about producing wealth, and it does that very well. It's been developing very quickly in the last 10, 15 years. But really, from transitioning to developing wealth, but actually assessing this wealth and breaking it down into what is important. So is this economic value or is this social value?
I think what we have to look at is different ways of behavior and enlarging the people and the types of people who are engaged in environmental thought.
公交黑，地鐵黑，接着低人黑黑黑，環保黑，節能黑。
2 years ago, Northwestern University graduate John Romankowitz left New Jersey to learn Chinese in Beijing. Meeting China's energy needs was the future, and he wanted to be a part of it. In China, he met Xiang Wuzhao, or as his American friends call him, Shane. Sharing a concern for the environment, John and Shane became China's Green Brothers. They produce videos for China's Green Beat, which uses the internet to show young Chinese that being environmental can be cool. Here's their story.
We came up with this idea to make videos to share what we knew and what we were learning about the environmental problems and also the solutions occurring in China now. A new energy source that's growing very rapidly is wind power. And so that first minute of the episode introduces the problem, and then we go explore a wind farm in Beijing, and then we explain how wind power is expanding in China.
风急天高猿啸哀，渚清沙白鸟飞回。
风黑，剑白黑，绿色能一碗。嘿嘿嘿，风能黑，剑白黑，绿色能一碗。嘿嘿嘿，风能黑，剑白黑，绿色能一碗。嘿嘿嘿。
We want to create multidimensional thinking about solving environmental problems. And we want to help create a venue for people to communicate and then create greener design, lead greener lifestyles, make greener investments. We really want to lead the green movement in China.
We want to create the fashion of environmental. We want people to think that green is totally cool.
And mobilizing young people and getting them really engaged, like the videos we saw of this China Green Beat, those sorts of initiatives very important.
Despite all that we've done negatively to the world, I think it's nothing compared to what we can possibly achieve.
War takes a toll on more than human life. It lays waste to more than man's cities and villages. It destroys the earth. The environment is often the silent casualty of war, overlooked and underreported.
Got 13, bro!
Allison Lincoln Day's new film, Scarred Lands and Wounded Lives, looks at the environmental footprint of war. The film was first shown in March 2008 at the Environmental Film Festival in Washington, D.C.
Sometimes we think that it's easier to make war than to work to prevent it or to clean up after it.
The military is a major player in terms of environmental outcomes.
The environment is war's silent casualty. When we talk about the costs of war, we rarely focus on what happens to the land, the animals. We rarely focus on that which sustains human life.
We're completely out of sync now in defining threats to our security. At one time, the principal threats were military. They no longer are. They're now environmental.
In the Homeland Security Department, they're thinking about vulnerability and preparedness. We just haven't made the same commitment yet in climate change, but we really need to do that.
At the moment, it's as if we're sleepwalking into disaster. We can't afford to sleepwalk into the future. We must take decisions and action which create a world that we want our children and their children to grow up in.
Scarred Land, Wounded Lives is the first film made by Allison Lincoln Day. The Days are authors who specialize in writing about population growth and aging. They tell Earth Focus correspondent Miles Benson why they dedicated the last 4 years to documenting the environmental impact of war.
Allison Lincoln Day, you've made a documentary that is very, very interesting about the environmental impacts of war and militarization. What is it you wanted to say and to communicate to people with this film?
We had become, as many people have, I think, very concerned about the condition of the planet. We started thinking about the film back in 2004 when the Kenyan biologist Wangari Maathai won the Nobel Peace Prize. The Nobel Peace Prize people linked the idea of peace and work on the environment. I think that was an inspiration and a stimulus in addition to many other things.
Leon, what is the message that you are delivering with this documentary?
Well, I think it's well put by one of the people in the film, Jim Janko, who was a combat medic wounded in Vietnam. And he speaks of war as, or rather as the environment, as the silent casualty of war, with destruction of cities, destruction by bombs, by heavy artillery, landmines, so on. It's the civilians who are suffering more than the military.
This was the time at which Al Gore's film came out, and there was a big increase of interest in climate change and global warming. People who had a sense of real urgency about what was happening, that everything we do has to start to be thought of in terms of the footprint on the environment, in terms of the emissions and its contribution to global warming.
Is it the making of war itself, the bombs bursting, damage done, or is it the maintenance of a standing army and the maintenance of a continuing national defense that devours the environment?
It's probably safe to say that there is a good deal more damage in the long run to the environment than there is from preparations for war than there is from combat itself.
Allison Lincoln, when you call the Defense Department, when journalists call them and talk about environmental impacts and their footprint, you're quickly told that this is something that they are concerned about, that in fact for some time they've been trying to reduce their impact. Are you impressed by any of this, or does it pale?
I think it's very impressive because it shows another step in the direction that we're coming. I think this is all fairly new, but at the same time this is going on. We know that there's an increase in bombing, for instance, now in Afghanistan, and every one of those bombs dropped does enormous damage to the environment as well as to people. And that's the whole point. It scarred lands and wounded lives. It not only destroys a village, destroys the housing, it destroys the land in which people can raise crops and so forth. It destroys all of those things which people need for their livelihood as well as lives themselves.
In your film, you look at the amount of oil that's consumed by the military establishment. Let's take a look.
Fossil fuel is a particular problem in this time of concern about climate change. Just one example I think illustrates it well. If we imagine one F-16 fighter jet flying for just under 1 hour, it uses approximately twice as much oil as the average American citizen uses in his or her car every year.
The F-16 is just one machine in one branch of the military. To take another example, the Army's Abrams tank weighs 68 tons and requires 2 gallons of fuel per mile. All told, the United States Department of Defense burns some 350,000 barrels of oil per day, making it the world's largest single consumer.
And your thought is that actually the amount of oil consumed is larger than that, isn't it?
Really, all that they have statistics for in the American military is the consumption here in the United States. The consumption overseas, in Germany, in Korea, Iraq, this gets recorded someplace else, and they're not quite sure where or how accurate the record is. I think a good guess is, look, there's just a whale of a lot of this non-renewable resource that's been up till now very important for modern lifestyles, is consumed by military action.
If you think in terms of the fact that we may have only 100 months left before a very dangerous tipping point in terms of global climate change, and at the same time all this activity is going on, it gives one pause for thought. And in our film, we wanted very much to tie in the amount of oil being expended in this fashion with climate change. And again, it gets back to the idea that this is essential to national security.
Allison Lincoln Day, thank you very much for being here.
We enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
Nice of you to have us here.
Yeah.
With climate change, no one has more at stake than young people. And on campuses across America, they are speaking out and taking action.
My mission at Lawrenceville this year has become spreading awareness.
Applying my classroom knowledge to a real-world application has definitely opened my eyes up to where the technology for biofuels is going and how it can contribute to cutting down on greenhouse gases.
I think that young people are really stepping up and taking more direct action. Whether it was the Campus Climate Challenge, where we got over 500 campuses to agree to carbon neutrality, but we realized that wasn't enough, and we had to work in our communities.
Step it up! Step it up! Step it up!
Last year, April 14th, was Step It Up 2007, and over 1,400 actions were organized around the country demanding Congress to cut carbon 80% by 2050. And many of those were organized by young people. And then in the fall, we had Power Shift 2007.
I love the energy in here, man.
Power Shift 2007 brought over 6,000 students and young people from all over the United States to the University of Maryland for the first meeting of the youth climate movement. On the agenda, building a clean energy economy, achieving energy independence, creating millions of green jobs, and increasing global equity.
You are the people. You are making this change possible. You are making this power shift possible.
For 3 days, November 2nd through 5th, 2007, student activists learned how to spread the message of civic participation and empowerment. They held a rally on the last day of the summit and encouraged members of Congress to support environmentally friendly legislation.
We said no to that. We said yes to investing that money in green jobs, energy efficiency.
Green jobs, not jails.
Today's generation of environmental activists understands policy and politics. They are media and technology savvy and have the organizational skills to make a difference. Their numbers are growing.
A generation has come to Washington today to lead, to be heard, and to find allies in this Congress who are ready to do what is necessary to solve our climate crisis.
We've been telling leaders, whether political, corporate, or otherwise, you have to look at the fact that their actions that they take today will have an enormous impact on those of us who are only starting out. It's an issue of intergenerational justice, and that people have to live up to building a future that's worth living. We're calling for a phase out of fossil fuels. We're calling for transition to a clean and just energy economy, one that builds green jobs rather than injustice. We're calling for a revolution in how we get our energy, how we build our buildings. And we've modeled and shown that it can be done. It can be done well, and the economy and people and our health does better by it.
Welcome to Colby College in Waterville, Maine. It's 8 below today, so you may not think that we have to worry about global warming.
We're also doing it ourselves, and we're hoping that we're setting an example. Over 500 campuses have committed to carbon neutrality. So that means you often get your energy from renewable sources. It means your buildings don't use electricity that might be produced by coal or gas or other dirty forms of energy. It's really looking at a systems-wide approach where we reduce carbon emissions to zero.
We see colleges and universities as beacons for the future. They're really the standard bearers that will lead the way towards a sustainable future. They go on as graduates to lead organizations and communities not just in the United States, but all across the world. So it's imperative that not just the environmental studies students, but students in every discipline receive coursework and training on sustainability issues, both as part of their education and as a requirement for all students.
As you can see, even when we're buried in the white stuff, Colby is still making the choice to think green, and we hope that you make the right choices too.
This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. network dedicated to global and national news, uncompromising documentaries, and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world.